stories, if I can take time for
please.
it, one of the stories that I love that I'm gonna give you a perspective on Naomi that I'm not sure you've really thought of before.
Okay.
Naomi, she's in the book of Ruth, but between you and me, it shouldn't be called the book of Ruth. It should be called the book of Naomi.
Okay.
Because it's actually not Ruth's story. It's actually Naomi's story. It starts with Naomi. It ends with Naomi. Hers is the most common name in the book. It's Naomi's story. And I'm going to assume that people watching this podcast are a little bit familiar with the story of the book. I'm not going to rehash the whole story. And if you're not, go to the book of Ruth and read it. It's a short read. But it's a redemption story. And the idea of a redemption story is this. Okay, let me just explain a redemption story. A redemption story, there's not so many of them in the Bible. The idea of a redemption story, it starts with comparative serenity and peace and happiness. But then something happens in the life of the hero in the story that is absolutely horrific, gutting, decimating, agonizing, incredible losses. It appears that they'll never recover. Irrecoverable losses. But then God redeems the story and restores not only what was lost, but so much more, so that the hero of the story ends up with much greater advantages than if the trial had never happened. Naomi's story is a redemption story. In fact, we even have the theme of a kinsman redeemer in the story. But when you look at it on the surface, it doesn't seem to be that strong of a redemption story. I mean, look at her losses. She lost her husband Elimelech. She lost her 2 sons. She is reduced to abject poverty. She returns from Moab back to Bethlehem. She says, "Call me Mara. God has dealt bitterly with me." Mara means bitter. And when you look at what she had and what she lost, at the end of the book, the story ends with her holding a baby, Obed. And you're like, well, that's nice. I mean, I appreciate that she ends up with a baby at the end. And they said, a baby has been born to Naomi. And that's nice. But, I mean, look what she's come through. She's lost her husband. She's lost her 2 sons. And she gets a baby at the end. Like, it just seems a little bit anticlimactic when you think of what a redemption story should hold. But wait a minute. You have to wait for 150 years after she dies. After Naomi dies, now we don't know the number, but it's maybe roughly 150 years. A guy ascends to the throne of Israel. His name is David. And somebody goes, "David, are you aware that your great-grandmother had an unusual story?" And David goes, "Go find that story." They went digging for the story, and they found the story of Naomi. When she died, she thought that she died with a baby as her restoration. What she didn't realize Naomi came into the line of Messiah himself. Because of her faith, she became an heir to the messianic line. The Davidic dynasty came because of Naomi's faith. And when she died, nobody knew it. Nobody saw it. It wasn't until 150 years later that the significance of the redemption story was known. Is it possible that God can write a story with our lives that right now nobody knows how significant your redemption is? And it may not even be until after you're dead that it'll come out what God really did with your life. He writes redemption stories, and for me, Naomi is an example of somebody that didn't even know herself what her faith had done. But now, all these years later, we look at the story and go, wow, a fantastic redemption story. And this is what I am in for. I am in for a God story, a redemption story. And I look at my life, 30 years in a trial. It just doesn't seem right. Like, God, surely you would have fulfilled your promise by now. But I am believing for redemption in my life. So many losses, and I'm asking him to write a redemption story where the benefits in the end are greater than if the trial had never happened. I do not yet have a redemption story.
Okay.
And I am fighting